In this video, I'm going to show you how to make some coasters. Here I've got some scrap, I believe rosewood. I think it's rosewood or cocobolo. I use AI to help figure that out. Check out my other video where I showed that. And typically the coasters I make are 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch or 4 inch by 4 inch, around that range. This one is 15 inches long, which means I can get 4 3.5 inch wide coasters per side, because this is thick enough. And this video will just go through the process of basically slicing it down with the table saw, using a thickness planer to surface both sheets of wood, and then going through the finishing process, and boom, we'll have a set of coasters after this. So stay tuned. Now in this first step, I'm going to use my table saw to rip this down the middle. Don't do this all in one shot. I'm going to basically creep up on this, send it through once with a shallow pass, flip it over end for end, send it through again, then raise the blade a little bit more and do the same thing, send it through once, send it through twice, and do it until I eventually meet in the middle. And I need to try and get as equal width on both sides as I can. That'll make it a little bit easier when I go through the thickness planer, because they will already be roughly the same thickness. It's just a matter of smoothing out the saw blade marks. All right, I've got both pieces, saw down the middle. Actually, the saw blade marks aren't too bad here. I can see them up close, so this is why I'm going to send them through a thickness planer. So an important piece here is this was already surfaced on two sides, and those two sides were very smooth. Those are the sides that I want to be face down when I run through the thickness planer. So I've got the original board splayed open. I'm going to run it through it this way first, because the undersides are both very smooth and even already. That way I can get the tops even, and there's probably no need to flip it over and run it the other way. Just to save thickness, I don't need to do that. So let's run this through the thickness planer next and get these nice and smooth. All right, these are looking pretty good. There's an unfortunate amount of planer snipe on these, which I didn't employ any techniques that you'd usually use to avoid planer snipe, which is unfortunate. It's fine, I'll sand it out. Just kind of annoyed with myself. But outside of that, looking pretty good. Just a minor crack right here. I need to fill them with some wood putty. These are looking very nice, and now they are the same thickness. Now I can slice these up into little coasters. Before I forget, we're not gonna hit the table saw yet. We're gonna use the sander first. The reason for that is because it is much easier to sand one continuous board twice, so one side and the other side, than it is to cut this into 4 little squares and sand those individual squares individually. That's a real pain in the butt, especially when it's so thin and you have to like grasp it with your fingertips in order to grab these little squares. So I'm going to sand it first, then run it through the table saw, cut my little squares, and then maybe I'll hit it with the sander one more time, just depending on how clean those table saw cuts are. So let's sand this first. Well, I sanded me out of 80 grit sandpaper. It's unfortunate. And I'm on my last piece of 120 grit, and it's partially used. So good thing is this is from 3M. They're not a sponsor, but they are legit manufacturers of sandpaper. So I can use 120, I'll go up to 150. Maybe I'll spend a little bit extra time with the 120 grit, just to make sure I smooth out all the bumps and nicks there. And then that'll be the end of this last paper. And I think I should go order some more after this. All right, let's get to it. Before I move on to 150, this would actually be a good time to create wood putty for these little holes. There's a crack right here. Same thing on the other board. The reason why this is a good time is because, as I mentioned, this is my last sheet of 120. It's on its last leg, and so if I'm going to get glue on one of my sheets of sandpaper, I'm going to do it on the one I'm going to throw it away right after this. And so it basically goes a little bit like this. I'm going to take this off. I just need a very small dab of glue. Try not to get this on my table saw. Put that down there. And it really is, you don't need much here. Put a little bit in there. It's been sitting in a cold shop, so this is extra thick, unfortunately. And the general idea here is you put wood glue in a hairline gap or a very small hole, and you sand it, and that'll bind the nearby sawdust that you create to that wood glue, and it's an exact color match, and it's generally fairly invisible. Yeah, that's pretty good. So this right here, yeah, you can see it, but when you look at it in context with the other sort of white stripes here, you can't really tell that is wood putty. Same thing on this little tiny gap right here, or this little hole. You can't really tell that in the very center of the circular grain, there used to be a hole that I filled it with wood putty. That's really all there is to it. Got these nice little squares. Right now the corners and edges are very sharp, obviously, because they're clean cuts. So the rest of this is more like just soften up the corners, apply a little finish on it, and it's basically good to go at that point. So stay tuned a few more seconds to look at the finishing process and what the end result looked like. Thanks for watching.